Good morning, fifth grade. Today we are wrapping up our text in our Civil War unit so that we can start our performance task next week. But we're going to read the last section in the novel titled A New Era Begins. But before we get started, we have a quick write to complete. It says, what predictions do you have about how the North and South will become one nation again? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. It says, what is the main idea of the text? How did life change in the North and South after the war's conclusion? And then our vocabulary for today, the first one is Reconstruction, and that's a period after the Civil War when the states that used to be the Confederate States were brought back into the United States, and that was a 10-year process. The next word is exile. That's when you kick someone out of their country because of you disagree about things politically. So the government forces them to leave the country. And then the last one is allegiance. And allegiance would be like loyalty to a group. Oops, that did not work. All right, turn the page in your notes, and we're going to ask our how or why question about the title so that we can have a main idea. And it says, a new era begins. And so the question I came up with was, how did a new era begin after the Civil War? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to read. And as we're reading, we're going to be underlining our answer to our question, how did a new era begin after the Civil War? Let's read on pages 62 and 63. For more than 10 years after the Civil War, the South was occupied by federal troops. This period of U.S. history is known as Reconstruction. So I underlined that because it gives me that definition of Reconstruction that's going to help me in my main idea. Those who had served in the Confederate Army had to take an oath of allegiance to enjoy some of the benefits of citizenship. Some never regained their right to vote. Meanwhile, newly freed slaves were encouraged to vote in local elections. Several African Americans were appointed to federal and local government positions, and some became members of the U.S. House of Representatives. Ambitious carpetbaggers moved to the South, buying out businesses and taking over local government positions. Southerners who cooperated with the carpetbaggers were called scalawags. Elected president in 1868, Ulysses S. Grant served 2 terms and presided over the nation's industrial expansion. And in 1876, the United States celebrated its centennial, which means its 100th birthday. Many of the festivities were held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the nation's birthplace. And Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is called the nation's birthplace because that's where they drafted and signed the Declaration of Independence. All right, so we have enough information for our main idea. We know that for more than 10 years after the Civil War, the South was occupied by federal troops, and that period is called Reconstruction. All right, and we know that there was Reconstruction because they were trying to rebuild the Southern economy and culture, and they were trying to bring unity back to the United States. So for our main idea, we would write, U.S. troops occupied the Southern states after the Civil War for a period known as Reconstruction, in an attempt to bring unity to the United States. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. In box 2, it says, how did the United States government respond to former Confederate soldiers? And if I go back in my text where it talks about the Confederate soldiers, it says those who served in the Confederate Army had to take an oath of allegiance to enjoy some of the benefits of citizenship. And the people who fought in the Confederate Army were special because they were fighting against the United States, so they were seen as traitors. And so the government takes being a traitor very seriously. Typically, the penalty is death, right? But instead of killing all of the Confederate soldiers, they asked them to take an oath of allegiance before they could enjoy the rights of citizenship, like voting, and things like that. So in box 2, we would write down the United States government responded to former Confederate soldiers by making them take an oath of allegiance in order to get back their rights as citizens. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the second part of box 2. Why were some Confederate soldiers not allowed to vote? If we go back in our text, it says some never regained the right to vote. And if you had to take an oath of allegiance before you could enjoy the benefits of citizenship, but some people never got their right to vote, that lets us know that they probably didn't take the oath of allegiance. And so in 2B, we would write, some Confederate soldiers were not allowed to vote because they never took the oath of allegiance to the United States. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 3. It says, how did the United States government respond to former slaves? And so if we go back in our paragraph, it says, meanwhile, newly freed slaves were encouraged to vote in local elections. Some African Americans were appointed to federal and local government positions, and some became members of the U.S. House of Representatives. And so in box 3, we would write down, the United States government responded to former slaves by encouraging them to vote and by appointing some to federal and local government positions. Some even became members of the U.S. House of Representatives. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the second part of box 3. It says, how could elected African American officials get benefits for former slaves? So as an elected official, you have the power to make and change laws. And so yesterday we were talking about the Jim Crow rules in the South. And so if more African Americans were making the laws, they could make a difference in those policies. And so in 3B, we would write down elected African American officials could pass laws to help former slaves have a better life and fight discrimination in the South. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 4. It says, why might Northerners move to the South during Reconstruction? If we go back in our text, it says, ambitious carpetbaggers moved to the South, buying out businesses and taking over local government positions. And so we know that in box 4 we would write down, Northerners might have moved to the South during Reconstruction to get African Americans' political support and take advantage of the devastated economy. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 4B. It says, what does the name Scalawags suggest about what people thought about Southerners cooperating with carpetbaggers? And so just like we talked about how carpetbagger was an insult yesterday, Scalawag is also an insult. And so if you are a Southerner cooperating with a Northerner who moved down to the South to take advantage of people, people also called you a bad name because they didn't like what you were doing. So in box 4B, we would say scalawag is an insult or a derogatory term, which means that Southerners did not like people who cooperated with the carpetbaggers. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, how does the author describe the new era of the United States? So you can use your main idea about Reconstruction and then give details from the text with a quote to support your answer.